very good.
Zeros and ones.
Zeros and ones. I was surprised actually going through this set how long ago some of these songs were written, because a lot of the songs that came out in '93 were actually written at the end either of 1990 or the beginning of '91 when we were touring. Zeros and Ones was part of a batch of songs that had working titles of wherever we were touring at the time. So when I go back and try and find all the old sample discs and stuff like that, I find songs called Melbourne or Sydney, or things like that. And I think actually Zeros Ones was Melbourne, given that it was written in kind of half a day off there or something like that. Other than that, I don't really remember much about it. I don't remember kind of early versions or anything like that.
Just place of birth.
Move Mountains.
Cab. It's a cab ride. It was a cab ride that Mike took on the way. Yeah.
Yeah, Move Mountains. Mikey wrote that in a cab, didn't you, Mikey?
Yeah, the idea from the for the words was in a taxi cab. Actually going
to Eden Studios.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, to work on one of the first singles that we did.
We were doing Bring.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was going on the way to do Bring It On Down, and it was just all the kind of religious, ephemeral stuff that was there. Thank you for that.
And
I think this guy's cab. Didn't you say it looked like a shrine to?
Yeah, it was a religious kind of shrine on wheels.
International Bright Young Thing.
International Bright Young Thing was called. Its initial working title was Fun, and for ages and ages, we knew what it sounded like. We knew what it sounded like for about 6 months before we knew what title it actually had, and what the words were like or anything like that. And it was part of a batch of songs that Mike had written, music-wise but not lyric-wise. And we were coming back from a world tour in Japan, and we'd spent this huge long flight where we'd gone over Siberia, and it was the most boring flight. And when you look out, and all you see is like this lunar landscape. And so Mike spent the time, obviously, and wrote the lyrics. And I can remember getting on the phone to Jen, our drummer at the time, and saying, because they're both still living together, Mike and Jen, though not in the biblical sense. And I remember saying to Jen, "Hey, has Mike written any words yet for that song?" And Jen said, "Oh yeah, he has actually, he has." And I was like, "What is it? What's it called?" And he said, "It's called something really strange." He said, "What was it?" He said, "It's called International Bright Young Thing." And I was like, "Oh, you're joking? That's useless. It'll never be a hit. It'll never work." What did I know?
Yeah, but you've seen that a film of Bright Young Things is being made with.
Yeah, that's right. There's a film called Bright Young Things. There's a book called Bright Young Things. We see the phrase everywhere now.
The book was where I kind of got the idea from.
Yeah.
It was, someone like Christopher Isherwood, or no, it was one of the wars, I think.
No, Mike, you don't say it was his idea. You say it was your idea, and then everybody else.
He stole from me in the.
Yeah. No. Then they have to pay you. Now you have to pay him.
That's how it works, is it?
And
I think
America
it's
loved it lots, yeah?
Yeah.
It's big in the States.
It wasn't released in the States.
Actually, no. International Bright Young Thing wasn't a single in America.
Wasn't it? Oh no,
it was just it was released here.
It's real.
Yeah, it's one of those songs that you get these strange kind of chart conditions where it was one of our biggest hits. It had the highest chart placing, I think, of most of our songs in Britain. But it sold the fewest, I think. Well, one of the fewest. There were songs that sold a lot more. Something like Real, sold so much more than International Bright Young Thing, and got about 13 places lower or something like that. So kind of strange thing. But so International Bright Young Thing, which never sold.
19, wasn't it? Something like that.
7.
7.
Got to number 7.
Wow.
I hate to be.
Actually, it said that in the papers. I had a birthday the other day, and a paper put down, born on this day. Jerry Borg, and it said had a number 7 hit.
There you go, you see.
With International Bright Young Thing. So
Didn't we have another number 7 hit with The Devil You Know? Or are we leaving?
No, that was number 10.
That was number 10. Right, what's next?
Caricature.
Was that a B-side? Because I don't even remember where that was from.
Very popular B-side.
I was looking for it for about a month.
With the fans.
Yeah, it was. It was
the B-side of.
It was on the B-side of Who, Where, Why originally, and it was one of those songs that we performed it live, and it sort of it created a life of its own once it started to become a live track. So when you play things, you're just like, oh well, we need to flesh out the set. We'll play a B-side, and after a while, when you're doing the set list, you're like, oh yeah, we'll put Caricature in because it's a belter live, and it just kept on turning up in the set list and became just sort of one of our favourite songs.
Didn't the two girls from Soho get on stage with us at UCLA and start singing it?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh God.
I think it's because they had that, what was the hit singles, like Hippie Chick?
Yeah.
They were doing that song before we went on, and me and Ian got up and we were just wearing our underpants with our t-shirts tucked in.
Yeah, that's
Pants
right, I remember. Oh, the things we get up to on tour, eh? So yeah, that was Caricature. It was a B-side and a damn good one.
I think it was written quite quickly as well, because I can remember looking out my window when I lived in Hanger Lane, and I
you looked
saw
back
you,
and I'd
and I
done it.
saw you. And I thought, what's he doing around my house? And you go to the drawings, you said, get your guitar, and you showed me a bit quick. You said, learn it, we're rehearsing it on Wednesday or whatever.
And the little bleeping noise on the song is Mike's alarm clock.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And if you
Have you
listen
still
to the
got it?
live, if you listen to the live version, check out the end of Ian singing. That's all I
Yeah,
need to say.
because I sound strange.
Next big thing.
Oh, torture.
Next big
Absolute
thing.
torture, the video.
Next big thing.
What was that about? That was
No, the
Why
video.
was Next Big Thing torture?
It's because of the video.
the video.
Ah,
Isn't
yeah.
it? You've blocked it out of your mind, haven't you?
Wasn't that bad for me?
We spent 2 days.
That's true.
This is Chris
You
Cunningham.
didn't.
Now everyone says, "Oh yes, he's done Madonna and the Aphex Twin," and but he moved to the Aphex Twin from us. We were merely a springboard for Chris Cunningham's career. So go on, sorry. You
Very,
Yeah, and they suspended us upside down on
They sus-
trapezes. What's the plural of trapezes? Come on.
PZA.
Trapai.
Aquarium.
Trapezium. No, that's trapezium.
basically, we had these
Trapeziums.
scaffolding poles stuck up our legs, and then we were harnessed with these ridiculous leather harnesses that were pulled so tight. You
Like
you
a
can literally
codpiece
feel-
sort of
you can
thing, you know?
literally feel your pelvis being sort of pulled in, and then we were suspended in this
Giant lozenge.
for
It was a
2
baked bean
days.
can, wasn't
It
it?
was a baked bean can.
Yeah,
It was a
it's
For
huge-
2 days, it literally spun round. So while they were strapping me in on the ground, Alan would be
90
sideways
degrees,
on,
trying to keep the
and
head
Ian
from
would be
falling off.
hanging from the ceiling.
Like a
We'd
bat.
be doing it as quick as possible because it was murder. It was absolutely murder, hanging upside down, especially being turned round slowly. This.
Quick as possible wasn't very quick.
To sort of alleviate the problem.
No.
There was lots of whining going on. If that's
There's lots
what
of
you meant.
whining.
You
stop
It was the funniest thing because he was at the back and we could just hear him going, oh, guys, I can't breathe. Guys. Like this,
And he went on last.
He can't see our faces and we're like sort of... Like,
They were going bright purple. They're like the tomato heads. It was absolutely superb. These kind of bright red purple faces.
And I watched it the other day. I watched the video about 3 days ago, and it's rubbish.
Well, when you see the
No,
video,
it's
it just
not.
looks like you're standing up, except for your head's upside down and like
Yeah.
a purple tomato.
It was ambitious.
You got
It was
bags
ambitious.
doing
It
that.
was ambitious, and
Respects.
the reason is well, it was like it's ambitious, and it never quite got there. If it had worked perfectly, it would have been one of the best videos of all
He
time.
was trying to make.
So that we were free falling in space.
Oh yeah, and he said to me he just wanted to talk to the band.
Yeah. Well, he did that. In that case, it was perfect.
You want to know what it looked like if we just stayed up for 3 nights just drinking solid. That's kind of how it turned out on the video.
The Devil You Know.
Devil You Know, Devil You Know is another song written on tour when we did lots of touring for Doubt in '91, and there was no other time to write but on tour. I used to take this huge great keyboard around with me everywhere and write all these songs with the titles of wherever we were playing at the time. I remember that the produced version that Warren Livesey did on Perverse, the structure was altered quite radically. And I think we still get confused now when we play live about which bit comes where, because it was all turned around quite a lot. And I think people often don't understand what a producer does, and in some cases, as Warren did, they kind of take a song and say, this bit will go better there, and you get completely confused about it the next time you try and rehearse once you've recorded the album. As with everything, I don't really remember much else about
Oh,
it.
you know what? That's another torture video. Remember that one?
No, it wasn't that.
So then this time they had us in a disused brewery in Whitechapel, I think, in the middle of December, which is about 0 Celsius or 0 whatever it was. It was freezing cold, and they stripped us naked and threw paint at us and give us a towel about the size of a handkerchief.
Mind you, having
and
said
a
that,
bucket of lukewarm water, then wash me.
Having said that, the other side of that is that it was a 2-day shoot, and we reacted by just spending the entire second day by getting absolutely leathered in the pub downstairs.
Well, yeah, it was still a pub downstairs.
Yeah. So we managed to make up for the pain of the day before by
That's
getting
it,
horrendously drunk the next
I
day.
remember everyone laughing at me when I was walking in, like going, he's here, he's here. He's like, why? That's what you're wearing.
And you had to wear a skirt.
She fancied you, didn't she?
Big hobnail boots.
And everything in the video everything was painted, even the director's cat, even the director's little cat, whose name was Major.
What colour?
Major Tom.
Blue.
Major Tom.
Major Tom.
White cat.
Blue.
White cat.
Blue.
Blue painted town.
Oh, crazy. In the face.
In the face of all of this,
Your little stage banter on this one, can't you?
oh, yeah, that's right. The song that came back and bit me in the behind. It's I wrote it in June, whatever the year was. What, 2001?
Yep.
Something like that. Yeah, about 3 months before the September the 11th bombing, and there are things about planes. The words have lines about planes coming down and killings in Afghanistan and things like that. We did a tour of America earlier this year, and you just feel it if you go into these strange out-of-the-way places in America. You've got to kind of preface the introduction, preface the song every night with saying this isn't actually kind of ambulance chasing in any sort. I wrote this 3 months beforehand, which all sounds like kind of really worked at, but it was just one of those things. I don't think it was particularly. It wasn't a case of having lots of foresight and having insight or anything like that. It was just coincidental, really.
Right, can you tell me if Arsenal are going to win the league this year?
Well, if you get me a guitar, I'll start writing a song and we'll see what I come up with. Wait, no, they're not.
Oh, last.
Bring it on down.
Bring it on down.
Bring It On Down was going to be our second single, and it was going to be this huge, great, big pop production. And it didn't quite come off really, and we eventually did record it as a single and release it as a single. But it was one of those records which I don't think we ever really caught on record the essence of what Bring It On Down was really about. It works so much better when we play it live because it's just this sort of very regular and almost monotonous sort of house groove. It's a real four to the floor song with lots of synths in the back. It's just an acid house song.
Yeah.
And we never quite got there recorded wise. It was better live, always better live.
The recording and mixing of it was torturous. We did so many different mixes, so many different versions, and which is kind of symptomatic of the fact that we just couldn't nail it. It just didn't sound right. Wasn't it you saying that it sounds much better when you play it live than it does on
So
the
much
equalizer?
better.
Yeah, I think that's because live now with all the technology that that we have now that I actually know more about the technology it was supposed to be made with in the first place, it sounds so much better. It sounds so much more like that kind of acid house thing that I was going for in the first place with huge guitars on it.
How much has technology helped you over, say, the 14 years since you started, with samplers and what you have now to do the earlier stuff? Has it helped you a lot?
The technology then that we had was fairly primitive. I didn't really know. I think the problem was really my approach to it. I didn't really know about this technology at all. I mean, I'm not of the age where I had computers at school or anything like that. I had no computer knowledge whatsoever. I knew I wanted to make these kind of sounds. So I was just completely at the deep end with all this sampling technology, and the use of it wasn't very good at all. I didn't really know how people get in these sounds, and I just tried to imitate it as best I could. But it was always essential to the way that we sounded, which is kind of ironic, really. It was essential to the way we sounded, but we were crap at it.
But getting things wrong in a certain way is what makes technology. Yeah, the little graunches around the edges are what made it good at first. When we started, we had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea. It took us a while to work out what the instruction manuals meant.
About a week, actually.
Yeah, about a week.
That's not a joke.
And then it was about a week, and I remember Mike ringing me up and saying, "Right, I've got it. When it says key group, it means sample. Sample means key group. That's what it is." And this was like this. One of those. It was an epiphany. And this, the sun shines down. You go, right, now we understand. But I think it's
a bit like that make for happy accidents. And
yes.
gigs,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
All the early sampling that you can hear on things like Liquidizer is done out of a sense of necessity rather than a sense of artistry, rather than a sense of, I'm painting this sort of picture, I want to do this. It was, I think we can just about do this, and this is all we know how to do, and let's see what we can squeeze into that envelope of knowledge and no more. So if you listen to the samples on Liquidizer, that's why they kind of sound chaotic and messy, because that's all we knew.
I think that's absolutely right, and that's why the first two albums, Liquidizer and Doubt was so quick to make because it was so slapdash, largely because the Food were releasing everything we had as quickly as we possibly could, as they could. I was just a third, I think, or a quarter of Liquidizer was written actually in the studio or on the way to the studio, like we were saying for Move Mountains. And the sampling, the same thing, was like, I've got 2 hours to finish this song off. What am I going to chuck in here? And that's why it's so primitive and so basic.
Right. Chemical number one.
Chemical number one. This is in that.
Listening to it sounds 70s hard rock. It's a bit of
Right.
an element of it.
I think listen to everything about it sounds 70s hard rock.
Yeah. Well, it's all those big. Oh, there goes my bloody phone.
Can you ask them what the answer is?
Yeah, no.
Well, Chemical number one, that's a strange period for us because I remember writing that and rewriting it, recording it and re-recording it. It was on already, which was the point at which Food started to get really worried about where it was all going. It was actually the point when Blur became Food's biggest band, which was a huge relief to me because Food had so much invested in already that they were, I think, incredibly nervous about anything, and they wanted to be absolutely solid gold, big hit album, which you just can't do. You know, you make an album and it's good or it's not. As far as we were concerned, if it sold 50 copies more than one before, or 50 copies less, that was neither here nor there. But for Food, it was very important to have the big album that was going to be bigger and all this kind of stuff. And so we just worked at those songs, and to be songs from already, and things like Chemical number one, I don't really have much of a clear memory of because it's just this huge period of writing, rewriting, recording, re-recording.
It was a period of forced writing as well, like Mike says, because Food wanted this great album, so Food pushed us quite hard, and they would say, "Oh, this isn't good. We need more stuff, and we need more commercial stuff, and we want stuff that will be, a hit single." And
This is after Perverse,
and it's no good sort of saying to somebody, "Oh, right, well, we need hit singles." You can't sit there and say, "Oh, right, you just write more songs," and eventually somebody says, "Oh, that would make a good single."
Right.
So I just remember being at home and. Every sort of week or so, the postman would knock on the door and give you a package. It'd be the latest sort of tape of Mike's demos of songs, and he'd do them in batches of 4. And there was literally, maybe 6 cassettes, maybe 6 loads of, of tapes, each with 4 songs. And it was just like, here's another 4. We'll see how these go. Here's another 4. And out of those, we just sort of put them all together and distilled them down into the tracks that eventually made it onto already the album, But I remember when we, having all these tracks and listening to them, Chemical was one of the ones which I guess jumped out fastest of all the tracks. When you heard it first, you were like, wow, that's great. It did have single written all over it,
Come On Home.
Come On Home has that's actually been around for a long time. I think one of the first versions I had of this was done in 94, 95, and it's been through so many different variations. And EMI wanted it was actually going to be one of the tracks for London, and EMI wanted it to go. They wanted a song for their greatest hits album. They wanted the one song that's not an old hit. And we just kind of gave them everything we had, and that's one of the songs that they chose. I don't know what else to say about that one, really. I mean,
Right Here, Right Now.
Ooh, Right Here, Right Now. Well, this is
Still paying the bills.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's like what we said before about in the face of this being about Afghanistan, and having to say, well, no, we actually did write it kind of before all the relevant events that you think it was about. Exactly, we had practice at saying that because we've had to say the same things about Right Here, Right Now for about 10 years now, because people say, oh yeah, you must have wrote it, you must have written it about the fall of the Berlin Wall and communism, what have you. Nope, it was written 8 months before that, at least 6 months.
Before the Gulf War.
6
Gulf War
months,
was in 91, wasn't it? Yeah, so it was written at the end of 89.
It was written at the end of 89, so it was written before the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was written before. A lot of people thought it was written after we'd been to Romania, because we went to Romania shortly after.
That's what I thought.
And it wasn't. It was written before then.
Was it?
Yes, because we played it in Romania.
And it's
I guess that would have to be the case.
Yeah.
I don't remember too well.
It's another one of those records. Mike wrote it because he had a cover version of "Sign of the Times" by a band that we won't name. Yeah, the band that we would love to name, but we won't name because their version was so rubbish. And he was like, well, I could kind of. And so there was elements of that in it, and there was also I think Mike had been listening to New York. You remember the Lou Reed album,
Yeah.
New York, and that had been a real big influence because that was this huge album. And Mike was like, "Oh, I wonder if I could write something like a real discordant Velvet Underground, Lou Reed sort of a song." And as ever, when you try to do things like that, you always get it hopelessly wrong. And it came out sounding nothing really at all like that, but it came out sounding a lot better than we thought it did.
I do remember it's one of the few songs that I've written that are kind of 3 or 4, maybe some more. As you're writing it, and as soon as you finish it, and you think, yeah, that's a really good song. I know I've got something there, and I was really excited about it. And pretty much as soon as I finished it, I took it down to Food's office, and I was just amazed at their response was, yeah, it's not bad. They now say that, with hindsight, that they loved it as soon as they heard it, but it was definitely a case of, yeah, that's all right, but we've got other songs we prefer. And I actually felt kind of really vindicated by its success in America, because I felt that it warranted that more than Food's response.
Right. Are you satisfied?
Oh, Are You Satisfied? Are You Satisfied is another B-side. It was originally around the time of Right Here, Right Now, because there was... It gets very confusing. Well, we spent so much time touring the album Doubt that when there was this period where it looked like we weren't putting anything out. So when we put out Right Here, Right Now, Food made a big effort to make Right Here, Right Now quite a special sort of release. So it was Right Here, Right Now and 3 new tracks. So they were like, Mike, we need 3 new tracks. And Satisfied was one of these batch of 3 new songs. So if you listen to them, they're quite a weird set of tunes. It comes from this set of tunes which doesn't really fit with Doubt because they're a progression from Doubt, but at the same time they're not quite Perverse. So they fall between 2 stools, and I think Satisfied falls between 2 stools. It's still a good record, but it's between those 2 stools.
The set for the gig, a lot of it has come from suggestions from fans. We actually thought we'd go out on the Jesus Jones website and to forum and chat forums and find out what people really wanted to hear. And I think because the fact that this was the B-side to Right Here, Right Now, that a lot of people voted this. It took us by surprise. I'd never have thought of playing this, and we haven't played it for 10 years.
It's been quite a long time.
If it weren't for the fact that fans voted for it so strongly.
Welcome back, Victoria.
Welcome Back, Victoria.
That's ancient, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is ancient, and then lyrically it kind of sounds it as well. This was actually written pre-Jesus Jones, and
Sounds sort of modern blues. Modern blues feel.
Did you basically knock that out in around 1985 or something, like 84?
yeah, I think
that we just did a Radio House one time. It was like, we
Yeah.
lived in the West before we moved to London to even pursue this, I think.
yeah, and it
Playing with
is.
this song.
It is so old, but I think again when I was writing down, I was so desperate for songs, and Andy Ross at Food actually always liked them we play, and I was so desperate for it that okay, well it sounds old and kind of crap now. We'll put it on there. Little to know, 11 years later we sing it, and with the lyrical content, the kind of the people. It was a bit of a cliche about Thatcher. That it was like kind of a return to Victorian values. And the lyrical content now, I mean, doing it in rehearsals in this century, let alone this decade, it just seems ludicrous, but I think people do attach emotions to it that supersede what it was actually about in the first place.
And it was also one of the songs that provided us with, I think, one of the best moments of any Jones live gig, when we played Victoria in Canada. And we played in a pool hall, and it was like you could sense it was in the air. They were waiting for us to play it. We're playing upstairs in this pool hall, and we started playing Welcome Back, Victoria, and the place was going insane. And that was the thing. I think they actually had to come up on stage and
No,
tell
they
us
told
to
us to
stop playing because the floor, the
building was
danger
caving
of
in,
collapse.
Yeah.
So we were nearly responsible for a nightclub, collapse.
Tragedy.
Yeah, a nightclub collapse tragedy in Canada because of Welcome Back, Victoria.
Message.
Message.
Message is wonderful because it sounds like the song from Rocky. Whatever it is. Eye of the Tiger.
But this is one of our first kind of bits. This is the first time we knew about Rocky, because I sent you the demo of that. So I listened to this, and never mind the fact that it starts off like Eye of the Tiger, and you wrote back saying, "How did you know I was so into Rocky?" So yeah, and this is how we found out.
I don't think it was written with any specific Eye of the Tiger references in mind.
Sure. I thought it was,
You're focusing on this copyright thing, aren't you?
Never enough.
Never enough.
Very early. Never enough written.
87, I think.
88,
87.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
But it was older than that, I think.
Yeah. Was it before?
Camouflage days, was it? Or
Yeah, it was.
Who?
It was.
not mentioned.
It was. I remember it was one of the first songs.
So it was
played when I
before
joined.
Info Freako and
Yeah.
Song 13.
About the same time, Mike.
I think
it was.
No, it
before
was,
Song
it was with
13.
Cut and Dried before Info Freako.
Right.
Yeah.
It's about
No-
Woody Allen
nobody
film.
knows.
It's about Woody Allen film. It's about the film Stardust
You're
Memories.
sure for copyright reasons you want to mention
Yeah,
that?
the lyrical themes in it are suggested by the film Stardust
Ah,
Memories.
right.
How's that?
Okay, that's
allegedly. I have to put allegedly in there, and then we're
yeah.
safe for
I
copyright.
also think it's one of the first songs used a sampler on, because do you remember you had it happy, 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 and it was one of the first samples you ever used on one of our songs.
I think he's right.
I'm pretty sure.
It
of
was that and Cut and Dried, I think, were the two
Yeah.
that started that.
And it was a hit as well, wasn't it?
Well, it got to
Nearly.
Singles Grave.
Yeah, 42.
Singles
Yeah.
Graveyard.
I
number
think
42.
on college in America, I think it was number one for some ridiculous amount of time.
College radio.
College radio, yeah. I think it was number one for something like 5 weeks.
But I don't think that really counts for anything in the real world. I think, as far as we were concerned at the time, wasn't it out when we were touring with the Shaman, or was that Info Freako?
No, that was Info.
I know there seemed to be a time when every time we brought a single out, it would go to 42 anyway.
Yeah, we had the 342.
We'd sit in the transit van, and they do that thing where they play the chart, and in the bit between 40 and 30, they'd be playing. And I wonder who's made it in this week. Could it be Jesus Jones? And they play a little snippet of Never Enough, and you'd be like, yes, we're in. And then they'd start the chart, and they get to about number 31, and you think, oh no, we've missed it again. And it happened because it happened with that, and then Bring went to 42.
You started
Don't
with
toy with me, could you?
Yeah, 42. We had 3 42s in a row.
Ring was
First three
46, but
songs.
that's
No?
Right.
Oh, was it?
Rocket ships of La Jolla.
La Jolla.
La Jolla.
Rocket Ships of La Jolla. This
La Jolla.
catches everybody. It's actually Spanish for the jewel.
Right.
And we found out about the pronunciation of it, Alan and I, when we did this promotional tour of America in the 90s, wasn't it? The first
90,
time we went
yes.
there. And they get you to these station IDs, places you've never been to, never heard of, and they're just this huge list. You go into the studio and we say, hi, this is Mike, and this is Al from Jesus Jones, and you're listening to blah, blah, blah in, San Bernardino or something like that.
50 more of those.
Yeah, so we just keep going through the list, and then you've got your engineers behind the glass, and we sat down and you were listening to in La Jolla, and you can see these people kind of cracking up with laughter in a way that English people laugh at Americans about Leicester Square and stuff like that.
And you sit there and go, yeah, well, okay, come on, say the word aluminium. Come on then. Come on
Going all
then.
day with oregano and herb and
Yeah. But it's about a church, isn't it?
Yeah, on one level.
yes,
it is.
Oh no.
Yeah, I remember then we did another promotional tour in completely different circumstances about 8 years later when the album came out, when another album came out.
Already.
Thank you. And we were driving up between Los Angeles and San Diego, which is where La Jolla is, and just driving past. I have this thing about churches the way they do look like rocket ships. And there's a classic example. I've heard from fans actually. I think it's a Mormon church. It's off whatever the interstate is that goes down to San Bernardino. Is it 5 or something? Anyway, who cares? And it's
It
this
is 5, I
amazing
think,
looking church, and apparently Mormon church. It's just like a rocket ship.
Right. Half up the hill.
It's your favourite.
Jerry can talk about this one.
Yeah, he loves this one.
I do love the song, I can't play it.
That's funny. I can't sing anything that's said either.
What's this about? I seem to remember at the time Mike was doing demos for London, and he was saying to me, what do you think? And I said, do some more harder stuff, and you
Did
came
he
back
actually
with that.
get it?
I do remember this sort of going on between us, and he came back with Half Up the Hill, which is a dirty, filthy song. It's written very
For a dirty, filthy lad.
Yeah.
with very humorous lyrics. I don't know, I really like the lyrics because I think they're funny and they're not self-analytical or they're about something very different.
There's a good link there because I can never remember them and you can't play it.
Yeah.
Is that the one with the Germans on the beach?
We have a lot of
Yes,
shared
yeah,
ground.
I
Yeah,
love
the
it.
Germans
I
on the
love it.
yeah.
I love it.
They dig at the Germans.
Real.
Oh God!
Everybody's favourite.
Actually, we like this song now. We
No,
really
we
like it.
don't.
We went through
You're faking it, Jerry.
We went through a time where I think Mike smashed the disc up and said, "That's it. We can never play it again," because we hated it. And now we play it, it sounds quite rocky.
I think
really,
it's good. It sounds good. It's just if you quite like a song when you write it and it comes out, that's all right. But when it becomes a single that sells the most in Britain, and you kind of
It's top 20, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No, it was 26.
No, it got to 15.
got to 19.
Fiver.
15.
Record letter says 19.
19.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Damn. No. The thing about Real also is that it's very much a song of its time.
Yeah.
And it's a song that's written and sounds like a song of its time as well. So I think it's in that sense it just dated so quickly. And there were times where we were on the Perverse tour and we were playing all these incredibly forward-thinking, futuristic rock epics, and then we'd be playing sort of real, which did sound sometimes a little bit anachronistic.
Wasn't it a send-up though?
It was. Lyrically, it's a kind of parody of.
Steve Arrington.
Really? Well,
Steve Arrington's the guy that wrote, as a soul singer in the 80s, had that single, Feel Real.
Right. Okay. Well,
Feel So Real.
that sounds exactly like the kind of thing as parody.
Yeah, and it parodies that, and it's saying, so what do you mean by it when you feel real? Go on, do you want to explain that one if you can? Because if you sit there and think about how you'd explain it, you really can't. It's one of those things. I feel you can't explain it, So that's lyrically what it's about.
It's one of those songs that bothers me when we play it because we can actually play it in our sleep. Sometimes we do.
Yeah,
and you
and it
that
sounds
point
like
where you
it.
hang on, where the hell are we? So
Well,
yesterday
yeah,
you woke up and
I
fell asleep for the last verse and a half.
Didn't I kind of sail off the end of it once? We were in front of 40,000 people in Brazil, and they'd all stopped, but then turned around and I was still. That's the only time that ever happened.
So an embarrassing hit for you, is that?
It wasn't really embarrassing. It's just I think it was. I never felt it was a really strong song. I thought, that's quite good. I'm happy with it. I'm proud of it. But it was never one I felt really strong about. And when it becomes that big a hit, and you have to play it at every single gig and every single
You
country,
do start to get a little sick of it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not a song you love in the first place, I mean, something like Right Here, Right Now, there's no problem playing time and time again. I still really enjoy playing it, but Real, there are times when it's just like,
I think Real is one of those songs where if every single Jesus Jones fan came up to us tomorrow and said, you know what, Real, we're not really that keen on it anymore, then we'd be like, oh great, thanks, okay, and we'll drop it out the set. But unfortunately, everybody keeps coming out and going, oh yeah, Real, I love that song. And so we do, you've got to keep them happy.
Also,
at the end of the day.
Real was our first top 40 and our first top of the pops.
Yeah, so so I guess for a lot of people it was their first introduction to the band.
Yeah.
and it's pretty much that I'm dreaming of when I fall asleep in the middle of it.
Yeah. Next.
Nowhere slow.
Nowhere slow.
No, it's not. I like this one. There are elements of it that bother me a lot, but it comes from a time of listening to a lot of drum and bass, and actually probably about '96, I think, originally that I started on this, and just trying to shoehorn that into what we do. It's just my hatred of traffic, kind of being a cyclist. You kind of get used to going wherever you want to go at any time. The few times I do have to travel in a car in London or any major city in the world, I just find it immensely frustrating. I mean, I think more so than normal people, because I know what an incredible waste of time it is, and how slow it is, how small the distances are that you travel.
Yeah.
Info Freako. Yeah, again, this is another one I can play in my sleep. There are some times when we don't even bother rehearsing it.
We don't really have to.
Yeah, but because it's been around for that long. What was the first version? 88, something like 87.
Very early.
So, yeah, but it's still a song that I love. It's still a song that you can see that we really get into. You look at the last chorus, even in rehearsals, and just seems like everyone's really enjoying playing it.
I joined the band after Info had been written and recorded.
All right.
And I remember, or the demo version of Info had been recorded, and I remember going down to Bath with Mike for the weekend, because we went down to go skating around Bath and Bristol, and we borrowed his mum's car. His mum had a little stereo in the car, and I played some tapes, and Mike would play some tapes, and he was like, "Oh, I've got this tape, it's just this, the demo's done," and I put it on, and he was like, and I was like, "Wow, that's incredible," and to me it sounded like. It wasn't like listening to a record which was hoping to be a hit. It was like listening to a record which had already been a hit. It was that confident sounding.
That was the demo of it.
Yeah. And I just remember, I was like, play it again, and we played it in the car, 20 or 30 times, all the way from Bath to Bristol.
Yeah.
We played. That was all we played. Info, rewind it, rewind.
It's funny looking back at the recording of it, because I think now when most people record things like anything with samples in it, it's always sequenced. Basically the band play along with the sequences of the record that stuff already. All the samples in that really early stuff. In fact, I think most of Liquidizer, and certainly on Info Freaka, all played in live, because I just had this one tiny little sample, and you had to trigger it by actually pressing a button on the front of it. There's no sequencing; it is just kind of pressing this thing whenever you needed it. So that's why you can get kind of samples overlapping and out of time and stuff like that, just because it is standing there playing them on top of the track that was already
Didn't
recorded.
have a 3-second life, that little blue thing.
It was less than 3 seconds.
It was 3 seconds if you recorded at the highest rate and played it
And then
back
played
at
back to the slowest.
But I think basically had something like half a second of recording time, and on that a career was built.
And wasn't it recorded in that studio in Barnet?
Yeah.
Was that studio
No,
in
No,
Barnet?
it was in Kingston.
Finchley.
Where I,
25 quid it cost you.
Yeah.
I used to work in a studio, so I
Was that the studio where everything was corduroy?
got us
inside?
in.
Including the engineer.
Including the engineer. Well, it was a 70 studio. What do you expect?
Hi guys, there was 2 guys that ran the studio, and one of the guys was letting us have it cheap without telling the other guy, which was in fact what broke them up. Mr. Santilli, the dodgy Ray Santilli geezer.
Is
Who
this
came back
libel
later
now,
with
not
his
just copyright?
This is the guy that came
We're
back
all in
with these
trouble now.
aliens with 3 toes about 10 years later. Ray did that big scam.
What?
And you'd been talking to Food for quite a while before Info Freaka. This was the one that they finally picked up on. Was
Yeah.
there a certain pleasure in that?
Well, I think at this point we do have to give us a bit of a thank you to our other drummer Jen, who was the
Jen.
guy that really he was the guy that he was quite instrumental in it all happening, really, because he was one of those guys that Jen was irrepressibly exuberant all the time. He was very up and full of life. And if you ever, the whole thing about being a gigging band was that I think that it obviously took a lot of that fighting spirit sort of it drained out of you, but Jen it never did. And he would ring up people and go, "Hi, it's us. Remember us? Want to give us a gig?" Ace. And he would do this all the time. And he, to his credit, he did it with Food, and it was him that actually made the call to Food or took a tape in and said, "Listen to this, it's Ace."
He'd been
And they did,
speaking-
and it was Ace.
He'd been speaking Food because our plan was to get a manager first who would then get us a record deal. And as far as we were concerned, these 2 people were Dave Balfe Management, who were managing bands at the time, like Zodiac Mindwarp and Voice of the Beehive. So we were after a manager. We had no idea about the record label. And the first thing I heard about it, I was rung up at work by Andy Ross, who said, "Oh yeah, we just had that Jen chap come in the office, and he's playing me this tape, and it sounds really good. Now, are you aware that we're a record company?" And I didn't even know Jen had stolen the tape of my room. That's what he did.
You were angry at him.
Yeah,
I still am as well.
Right, but the payoff to all of this is that because we'd taken in this tape, and I think the tape actually had a bunch of stuff which wasn't really. A bunch of stuff with the original demo that wasn't really all that good. And I remember Mike. It had some other stuff on the tape as well. And I remember Mike going, "Oh my God, Food are going to have this tape of us, which has got, it's got great stuff on it, but it's got all this rubbish stuff on the other side that we don't need." So I remember Jen actually went back to Food's offices and did some sort of diversionary tactic and actually stole all our old demo tapes back again.
Photos as well.
Yeah. He was like, Dave. He was like, "Dave, can you go and get me a cup of coffee? Thanks." And nicked everything back
He
again.
basically pole-potted us.
Yeah,
kind of
totally.
reset
Actually-
everything back to year 0.
Yeah.
Me and Mike used to, about 10 o'clock at night, we'd drive up to West Hampstead to this record company where I used to work. And I'd have the keys to the building. And I'd let us both in. We'd go through the tape store nicking our 2-inch tapes. I could get in a lot of trouble for this, actually. I'll go and I go, "No, that's got rubbish on it."
What's he got in your
Oh,
pockets?
this one's free. And we'd take him out, bung him in his car, drive home. That would be...
Yeah.
That would save us
Yeah.
90 quid or whatever.
And then we go joyriding.
So
Ram
when you
rating?
play Info Freaka, you think of the irrepressible Jen. Is that right?
Jen, yeah, that's what we think of a lot of things, I think, really. I mean, Info's just one of those songs. I mean, I can't... I don't think there's been a set that we've played live since 1988 that hasn't had Info Freako in it. I can't think of any gig that we played
Wembley
that didn't.
Stadium.
That had Info in it.
No, it didn't.
Yes,
Yeah,
it did.
No, it didn't.
Yeah, fiver. There you go.
Fiver.
Mike,
Your attention to detail is legendary.
I'm right. We didn't
No,
do
meaning
info.
you're wrong.
Oh no, we didn't do info at Wembley.
We did.
Yeah, we didn't because I
yeah,
remember.
we didn't.
I remember thinking it was a really bad decision. We didn't. Any money?
Who, where, why?
Wah.
Who, where, why? This is it still embarrasses me actually. One element of this, I've been talking about how the technology was kind of new to us. We didn't understand. Well, I didn't understand it.
The bass drum.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. Is it the album version? It's not the Harding and Kerner remix anyway. It's our version, which I think is the album version.
Yeah.
The bass drum's been sampled so badly. There's kind of a quarter of a second of silence at the front of it, or just kind of noise, which means that unusually for a dance track, the bass drum is actually entirely out of time with everything else on the record. And I listen to it now, and it just sounds appalling. I can't believe that.
It is. It's like sucking lemons trying to listen to the track. You're like, oh god, there's that bass drum. Oh no, there it is again. Oh.
It's always funny that's because I felt that Real 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 was a song that benefited from the remix, but I wasn't really sure about who, where, why. Apart from the fact they put a new bass drum in, which made it immeasurably better.
But that was the whole thing about the recording of the album Doubt. It was all done so quickly. It really was. It was like bosh it down, record it, and and we'll have it done. We turned the album around in it was recorded in 10 days or something.
Yeah, it was.
So the delight when it went straight to number one must have been.
Oh, the album.
Yeah. Oh, we couldn't believe it. We couldn't.
Yeah,
believe
especially
it.
I think at the time we went to number one over Luther Vandross and Sting or something,
Yeah.
which were people that 2 years before I thought we wouldn't even be in chart position.
I think there was almost too much delight really to work out what was going on, because at the time it went to number one, that around that week we were playing a gig. We were playing 2 sold out shows at the Town and Country Club in London, which is now the Forum, and there was an after show party after the second night, and it was like, your album's in at number one, it's been certified gold, so here's a gold disc for that. And the first album, Liquidizer, is now certified silver, so here's a silver disc for that. And it was like, we're playing to 2,000 people, sold out, both nights of the gigs have sold out, here's a gold disc, here's a silver disc. We broke the merchandising record in the Tanner Country Club, which had stood for 15 years. So in one sense, yes, we were really happy when it went to number one, but in another sense, it was almost like there was too much stuff going on then at that time to even decide what was really great and what wasn't. We could hardly take it all in.
Welcome, Mike Edwards, founder of Jesus Jones. What I'd like to do is go back to the period around the time that you were thinking, mid-80s, I don't like what's going on with the music scene at the moment. You are seen as being pioneers of indie dance music.
Yeah.
When you were sort of in the camouflage days in Walthamstow, what was there about the scene that you liked, the current scene, and that you didn't like? And tell me about that holiday in Spain where it all came together.
Well, musically, at the time, the late 80s, there was kind of mainstream pop music, which was not so much to fight against then. I think it was the beginnings of the kind of creating pop stars and having it being a kind of transparent process, the Stock Aitken and Waterman stuff. But basically, even that was kind of seemed fun at the time, and there was so much good music, so much great music. It wasn't really reacting against anything. It was more kind of looking at the stuff around, thinking this is all good. What I want to do is kind of bring this together. It wasn't trying to contrast against it, or at least the only way I thought we'd kind of contrast against everything else was by using everything else. So we were very much trying to kind of bring in hip hop and acid house with kind of Jesus and Mary Chain type stuff. When you listen to all the early tracks from Doughty era and all the B-sides from that era, lots of kind of feedback and stuff everywhere, which is very much a Jesus and Mary Chain kind of late 80s indie thing, but at the same time with all these acid house instruments, kind of the acid house sequencing going on, that kind of stuff. It was definitely not a case of thinking, I don't like this, let's make our own music. It was a case of, there's so much great stuff, let's bring it all together, and in that way we'll be different from everything else.
And on your first album, talking about those influences, Liquidizer listed 38 influences, which is a very meticulous number. It's not 40 or a couple of dozen, it's 38, right? Which were the main things that you're now thinking back? Well, which were the main influences that went into the Liquidizer?
I'd say Public Enemy were hugely influential. I think it was largely because of the way that they used noise in with the beats they had, and that seemed to me to be a really exciting idea. It made it very kind of vibrant and of the time. And it also, for me, linked in with what I talked about earlier, the Jesus and Mary chain were doing, this idea of kind of noise, this kind of slight lack of control, this kind of chaotic element, along with pop songs. Or simultaneously with pop songs. That I found really exciting. When I look back on the stuff now, I can hear that I was trying to go for that thing very clearly.
Right.
At the same time, just the sheer excitement of London at the end of the 80s with acid house kicking off, and the very early days of techno. That was, I think that became more important later.
Right.
But as far as we were concerned, in kind of 88, when most of Liquidizer was written, it was very much this kind of late 80s indie thing with hip-hop and the idea of noise as being an interesting thing in its own right.
Mm-hmm. Right, and you had the producer there was Craig Leon, who was Blondie and Ramones, and you were reported as saying that your first album, you weren't too happy with the sound. It was almost as though too much was crammed in.
Yeah, Liquidizer to me, I think first and foremost, I think the songwriting is pretty dreadful. It's very, very early on. Occasionally I kind of struck it lucky, but it was striking it lucky. I think it's a very basic and not a very artistic approach to songwriting, which didn't help Craig Leon's job as a producer. I do think Liquidizer sounds very one-dimensional. It's very harsh sounding. And I'd like to think there's a little bit more subtlety in the kind of sounds that we were using. But at this point in time, I'm very loath to kind of point the finger at Craig and say it was his point. I think it was partly the lack of quality in the songwriting, and also just the kind of domineering vision that I had. I mean, at that point, anyone kind of in contact with me knew exactly what I wanted to do with stuff, and often, even if it was the totally wrong thing to do, I would get my way and have it and make sure it was done. So I'm kind of, as I say, I'm loath to say that it's Craig Leon's work on Liquidizer that makes it sound, for me, a pretty shabby album.
Right. We were talking earlier about Jen and how much he helped in the sheer hustling within the music business. Did you ever feel, whether it was with Info Frico and that being a priority single by EMI, or then with Doubt going straight to #1 and all the sort of the excitement around that, did you ever feel that the hype is getting out of hand? Because there were some cries of hype, weren't there?
Yeah, I did. There were a number of occasions when I did feel it was kind of getting out of control, and obviously control was very important to me in those days. I wanted to be able to steer it where I wanted it, see it, and be seen the way we wanted to be seen. I remember very early on, the first tour of Britain that we did in early '89, someone criticising me largely on the basis of our press. And it was a real eye-opener, kind of realising that people would respond to what they'd read about you rather than what you'd actually said yourself.
Or the music itself.
Yeah, the music really didn't have... The music didn't have that much to do with it, apart from what other people had said about it. I remember being criticised very strongly for what other people had said about me, which was a real eye-opener. And I think by the time it got to... Doubt was called Doubt, largely because I was having strong doubts about everything going on, and the kind of the irony in the first song on Doubt, Trust Me, was that it was very apparent to me that I no longer had control. I didn't really understand what was going on with all of this. I couldn't make it go the way I wanted it to go. And I felt that yes, there was this kind of element of hype that certainly we benefited from at the same time. I mean, you obviously complain about people criticising you for something that's out of your control, but at the same time, we were being elevated because of things out of our control. There was this kind of mass hysteria going on, as there always is about anyone who achieves any level of fame.
Were you hurt by the reaction to Perverse, which was, I sort of feel, was the one that creatively satisfied you most of those first three? Is that right?
Perverse undoubtedly is the album I'm proudest of, I think, together with Warren, the producer, who did a fantastic job, very, very creative guy. Also already, actually, with Martin Phillips, I think the album after that was a real high point creatively. I think those two albums, ironically, probably are least successful of the EMI albums, were undoubtedly our best for me. At the time that Perverse came out, we already knew that everything we did was going to get slammed. at least in Britain. That's the way the music press works. I mean, you know,
They set you up to knock you down.
yes, setting up to knock you down. Definitely that happens. You can see with that. It's not just us. Any band in Britain, you know, 3 months before their next album comes out, which way it's going to go, how people are going to treat it. So I knew that we were going to get a kicking, which ultimately we did. There were elements of it that I was very unhappy about. The way people kind of criticised me for saying, things like he's such a control freak. The names of the band, the rest of the band, don't even appear on the sleeve, which they do. When it's things like that, though you kind of think, yes, I'm going to get a kicking in the press. People are going to say the music's rubbish, big deal. But when it's kind of stuff that's wrong like that, it does bother me. I also felt kind of from a creative point of view, it was the perfect album. Because that was a time when music was starting to slide away from this kind of exciting creative thing that acid house and techno had introduced. It was starting to slide back into the kind of Neolithic guys with long hair and guitars that kind of grunge brought back. And I mean, we had long hair and guitars as well, but it was mixed in with something that was a little bit more interesting, I felt. So I knew with Perverse we were in total opposition to what was going on at the time. And we suffered for that greatly. Certainly by the time the kind of electronica thing happened in America and all the big beat stuff about kind of 5 years later, that would have been a far better time to release Perverse. But it was kind of victim of the times it was brought out.
Another product of your great success was that you went from the small clubs where the music actually was created, your ideas, I assume. You went to playing in Rio to 250,000. Did you think that your kind of music lent itself to that kind of huge stadium vibe?
I do think that the writing I did on the albums started to progress. It progressed with the way that we moved. Liquidizer sounds like a band playing in front of 50 people. It's that kind of sound of an album. It has that sound to it. Perverse is a lot more grandiose, and all the kind of gestures are far larger. And lyrically, the themes are more kind of global in a way, and that was started with Doubt, as we could see things starting to get bigger. So it did kind of the success did change the way that the writing was done in that way. And I think also by the same token, with the stuff with Already and particularly London, it's kind of come back the other way, knowing that we're going to be playing smaller places has affected the songwriting again in a really positive way, because now I kind of write things and I'm thinking, how is this going to work in front of 200, 300, 400 people? Which I think makes the albums much more interesting for people who are going to come and see the band live.
So London is actually coming back to that sort of smaller, more intimate kind of club?
Very much so, yeah. London to some extent is kind of the way that I would have wanted Liquidizer to sound, in a way.
In a couple of hours' time, you'll be taking the stage at the Marquee. Have a great gig. Mark Edwards, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely, thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers.